So now we're returning our movies array as an observable, but now let's go ahead and actually query a real web service. And for this example, we're going to use a movie database service. You can go to it yourself and register if you'd like. It's the movie database, and you can get an API key to follow along here. But yeah, make sure you register first and you will get an API key so you can authenticate. And we're going to have to go ahead and import a new module into our application because Angular has a utility called HttpClient that we will use to call different web services, and we need to use the HttpClient module to import into our application. As we said before, Angular bundles different services and components into different modules, and we can do the same thing in our application when they get larger and larger, and we'll eventually get into that. So in your app root or the ng module, go ahead and import your HttpClient module from Angular common and then HTTP. And I've got an error here, so with the magic of TypeScript, I'll see what I need to actually import. Okay, HttpClient module. And then you're going to want to stick this bad boy right into the imports area. So again, declarations have been for pipes and components so far. Providers are our services, and imports are other ng modules. So now we can actually use a service as HttpClient. And we'll declare a new variable here in our constructor. Private HTTP is of type HttpClient. Now the IDE actually imported the wrong client here, so let me fix this. It actually comes from the same common module that we just imported in the main ng module. So you'll say import HttpClient from Angular common and then HTTP. Now, if you've been watching carefully, you might have noticed that every time we're using services, we're declaring them as private variables within our constructor. And that's because we want to just say they are a type of the actual service, because Angular is actually going to go ahead and figure out if the client or the service has been instantiated yet. And if it has, it's going to give us that instantiated object. If it hasn't, it's going to create one by itself. So we don't want to say equals new service. We just want to say that we have a variable and it is of type of that service. And we're going to let Angular's dependency injection figure that out for us. Now, if none of that made sense to you, do not worry, because we will go deeper into dependency injection as we continue to come out with more of these videos. But if you were wondering why we're making services in this way, that is why. Now, to keep demos pretty simple, I've been omitting types within our code, but now I'm actually going to start sprinkling these in, because as we're using TypeScript, that's one of the biggest benefits we have available to us. Not using your types is kind of like driving around a luxury vehicle and putting unleaded gas in it. So for example, we know this get top rated function that we wrote earlier returns an observable, but now I'm going to actually explicitly declare that returns an observable of any type. And make sure you actually put this on the right side of your parentheses. But this is probably a very generic expression, because I think the compiler was already catching that it was an observable of something, of a object that it was already detecting. So the any type there is just a generic type. It could be a number, it could be a string, it could be anything you need it to be. So we should actually probably define a class and then say it returns an observable of a certain class. But let's continue on right now. I'm going to import my movie API key, and if you are following along in this service, you're going to have to send an API key value in through a query string parameter, which is kind of beyond the scope of this video real quick. We're just trying to demonstrate the HTTP client. So I'm going to go ahead and just paste in my URL here of the API and define my base URL. Then I'm going to remove my hard-coded values of the movies array. I'm going to say this.http because I already declared a local HTTP client. I'm going to say .get URL. And then you'll notice my movie list completely breaks because, let's find out here. So what's happening is our ng4 directive is complaining about the data it's getting back because it cannot iterate over an object. And we have to actually get it in an array. And so that's where the data is in a property called results. We would have known that maybe if we type checked our data, but we did not. So that's, again, another lesson learned why we should use TypeScript's features to us. And so when we refresh, we get a list of dotted items because they are not named, they are title, and then we can see the actual full title of all top rated movies. And the reason why this still works with our previous code is because the HTTP client actually returns an observable itself. So we already set our code up to handle observables with the subscribe method. So this.http.get.url is just returning an observable, and then our list component can still handle this because we're already using the subscribe method and then catching that data when the next gets triggered.